somebody else who came face-to-face with the president, Sean Hannity, host of Hannity. He is live in Singapore. And, Sean, just before the press conference that the president wrapped up about 45 minutes ago. Good morning to you. Good evening to you there. Before he did the press conference, he sat down with you. When he walked into the room, you've known him for a while. What was your impression, how he felt about what he had accomplished?
It's interesting because the room where I'm in right now is actually the room where they first met, meaning the president, Kim Jong-un. To my left is the dining room where, after their initial meeting, they went in for lunch, and to my right is where the balcony is. Honestly, he walked in. I did see the Secretary of State. I saw John Bolton. I saw the Chief of Staff. All of them, it was obvious this had exceeded all of their expectations. And if you remember, before the president left for the G7, he was saying, okay, we're not signing anything, very unlikely. Yep. This is a get-to-know-you session, and in all likelihood, there's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings, and we'll go at his speed. He wants to go fast, great. He wants to go slow, great. But it was very obvious that everybody felt really good about it, and especially the president mentioned at his press conference, he mentioned in the interview with me that the one thing that he threw in at the end that he was really happy about, and he went into more detail in our interview, was that there are still the remains of Americans, and their families desperately want those remains repatriated back to the United States. So he was very happy with that. I think the biggest takeaway in all of this is that in the lead up to all of this, there were certain conditions, and the president went through this. If Kim Jong-un didn't stop firing missiles over Japan, if he didn't cross the DMZ, if he wasn't willing to talk about denuclearization, if he didn't break down that missile site that he broke down, none of this would have happened. And you know, it's interesting, you watch some of the other media, they're saying, well, the president gave up a lot, and the president gave up nothing. There wasn't a penny paid like Bill Clinton when he made a deal with Kim Jong-un's father. There wasn't cargo planes of cash, $150 billion in cash and other currencies, like in the Iranian deal that Obama made. It was clear that there was hope, cautious optimism. I mean, look, this cautious. Trust but verify. Everything that led up to this, and I think everything that they have going forward, as Mike Pompeo said, the hard work is now beginning.
Yeah, you're right. Even if they hadn't had the meeting yesterday, if it had been canceled, this country still would have gained from it, Sean. He got those 3 American hostages to come home safely, which was wonderful. I know you talked to him about the denuclearization process. Let's listen to a little bit of that interview, and then we'll get your reaction on the back end.
I just think that we are now going to start the process of denuclearization of North Korea. And I believe that he's going back and will start it virtually immediately. And he's already indicated that. And you look at what he's done. So we got our hostages back, but they've blown up one of their sites, one of their testing sites, their primary testing site. In fact, some people say their only testing site. They're getting rid of a missile, which isn't in the document that was done afterwards. They're getting rid of a missile testing site. They're doing so much now. So it's a process, and it's really moving rapidly.
Sean, that's great. Do you trust him, Kim Jong-un, that he's going to allow our inspectors to go in and international inspectors to go in and make sure he's actually doing this?
It's a great question because in many ways I see a lot of parallels between President Trump and Ronald Reagan. President Reagan talked about the evil empire. The world was shocked. The world was talking about and predicting that Ronald Reagan would start World War III or some type of nuclear holocaust. The president, even against his own advisors. Then Reagan said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. He walked away from Reykjavik. And then you look at where all of this started, Little Rocket Man, Fire and Fury, and all our button's bigger than yours and ours works better. And when you think of the process and all of the hoops that Kim Jong-un jumped through, and America gave nothing except we got the hostages, as you mentioned. Yep. We got Kim Jong-un crossing the DMZ. Missiles haven't been fired since December. These are all significant things that nobody would have predicted 6 or 7 months ago. And I think it really comes down to a philosophical difference that exists. between the left and right, and that is, do you believe in peace through strength, trust but verify, or do you believe that somehow the best way to somehow make a deal with a dictator is to bribe them, like Bill Clinton tried to bribe Kim Jong-il's father, or what we know happened in the case of Barack Obama, and we talked about the worst deal probably in the history of mankind, and that's given up $150 billion. There's hope, but there should be caution. There should be caution on the side of everybody. We know that a lot of these regimes lie, but Kim Jong-il, the average monthly salary for a family in North Korea, these families are starving. His regime is at risk because the people have nothing. They are isolated and they're cut off. The pressure from China because of the president's good relationship with the Chinese president, the pressure from Japan, the pressure from the United States, even the world community, it seems to all be coalescing at a good time. And the president, to his credit, saw an opportunity and was willing to take a chance. And moving at the speed of Trump, things are very hopeful, I think, a lot more hopeful than they were 48 hours ago.
So, Sean, I noticed the president will not go over the line and talk about maximum pressure. He got a question of what would happen if they back out of this. He goes, I'm not going to get into that. But he was not restrained when he first got the job because President Obama briefed him on how bad the situation was after a certain detonation in 2016. And here's the president telling you about his tough rhetoric and how it led to this moment. Listen.
A lot of people, critics, quickly saying, when you said Little Rocket Man or Fire and Fury, or, when he said, oh, I've got a red button on my desk, you said, well, mine's bigger and it works better than yours. How did it evolve from that to this? Because he did say at the very beginning, we're going to basically start over, but that has been building behind the scenes.
Well, I think without the rhetoric, we wouldn't have been here. I really believe that. We did sanctions and all of the things that you would do, but I think without the rhetoric, other administrations, I don't want to get specific on that, but they had a policy of silence. If they said something very bad and very threatening and horrible, just don't answer. That's not the answer. That's not what you have to do. So I think the rhetoric, I hated to do it. Sometimes I felt foolish doing it, but we had no choice.
So Little Rocket Man got him to the table, Sean.
You know what's really amazing about that is, and I had a follow-up question with him on that, and I said, so this was strategic. He said, I even felt a little embarrassed about having to go out there so aggressively. And clearly the president, and I would assume this is part of what the president did in his business life, is that he went right at him. And he went at him hard, and he didn't back down. And I think those things, coupled with the things he was saying, coupled with a show of military force. He was sending Navy striker brigades right off the coast of North Korea, showing a sign of force. Obviously, the sanctions have played a big part in all of this. And I also think that the president's relationship, it's an underreported story, the president's relationship with the president of China has played a big part. And I asked him about that because, remember, when the Chinese president came to the White House or in Mar-a-Lago or wherever they met, they were supposed to have meetings that would only last 15 minutes, and they would go on 4.5 hours. So a real bond and relationship was built there, and it led to a historic moment that I don't think anybody really saw coming. This is really fascinating, and I think what makes this president so far transformative in terms of being unlike any president we have ever seen in our lifetime. The only closest parallel I would see would be Ronald Reagan, because obviously it's peace through strength, it's trust but verify, strong rhetoric is being used. But if you really think about the magnitude and the possibilities here, again, being cautious, nothing is finished until it's done. Once the process, as the president pointed out, once that process of denuclearization begins, you can't go back scientifically. So I think this is going to happen in short order, and I think that the president deserves a lot of credit for being willing to talk to somebody that everybody thought would be a bad idea, but he did it from a position of strength.
Does this just get him
I think what really
reelected, Sean?
brought us to this point.
Did this just get him reelected, or is this going to help him with the midterms, the Republicans in the midterm?
You know, Ainsley, when you really put it all together, what do you have? You have, okay, the best economy in 500 days. You compare it to the Obama economy, 13 million more Americans on food stamps, 8 million more in poverty, the worst recovery since the 40s, lowest labor participation rate, doubling the revenues. And what do we have now? We have 14 states with record low unemployment, record low unemployment for Hispanic Americans, Black Americans, women in the workforce. You know, today in America, we have more jobs available than we have people on unemployment. Consumer confidence at a high. So do I think success for this president economically and what's happening here? Do I think that's going to have a big impact on this all-important midterm? Because we know what the Democrats' agenda is absolutely yes. And then I think once the campaign gets started, probably after Labor Day in earnest, you know, the Democrats, what? They want to impeach him. They want to say Russia, Russia, Russia. They have said they want to take back the tax cuts, what Nancy Pelosi called crumbs, which is $2,000 a family. They want open borders, and they want to keep Obamacare. I think that's a pretty strong comparing and contrasting election that I got to believe that probably the Republicans would win. The blue wave seems to be turning into a trickle, if you will.
Well, of course, the president went there for one thing, and that was for them to get North Korea to pull the plug on their nuke program, and he got that assurance. They signed that. They're in that suite of rooms you're in right now in Singapore. You're live at the hotel. Okay, so you were describing the location, but what was it like with Trump and Kim Jong-un? You asked the president, and this is what he said.
In the room alone, and then the subsequent talks with your team and their team. How honest, how brutal, what was said? Try and bring people into the room.
So we got along very well. We got along from the beginning. We started off, he and myself and two interpreters, and from the beginning we got along. You know, I've made the statement, and I've said it before. I've said it about a lot of different kinds of relationships. You can almost tell right at the beginning.
Did you tell at the beginning? What was that first minute?
No, I felt very good at the beginning, and I talked about we have to denuke. This country has to be denuked, and he understood that. He fully understood it. He didn't fight it.
So the president sizes somebody up in 1 minute, and in that first minute, he liked him.
It is, look, I think we all, in a way, have certain gifts in life. And the president, all the years that he's been negotiating deals, he's sizing people up very quickly. And I think right away, and it probably surprises the president a little bit, although there's been a lot of preparation, obviously, leading up to this. The Secretary of State did a phenomenal job. He deserves a lot of credit, as did John Bolton and everybody else. But it really, I think, came down to how well would these two men get along. I mean, there was communication. There was a pullout at one point. Clearly, North Korea, I think, needs this deal a lot more than the United States does. But the world needs it more than he does. Because if you really care, and this is why I think everybody should really be cheering and pulling for the president to be successful here, because if you care about your kids and you care about your grandkids, and you've got a possibility at denuclearization of the entire Korean peninsula, and you're going to stop missiles flying over Japan and the threatening of Guam and even the continental United States. They have nuclear weapons. They get intercontinental ballistic missiles. Then we're talking about reaching either the west coast of the United States, Boston, New York. Now we've got a much bigger problem.
Right.
And the idea that this could be a win-win, that they will have an opportunity to join the world community, an opportunity economically for their children and grandchildren, and a safer world. I just don't see how anybody can argue intelligently that everything we got leading up to this and all the possibilities surrounding this isn't good for everybody.
Right. I think one of the questions was, hey, did he get what he wanted by sitting next to a president of the United States? And he said, well, I've just saved, if I could save 30 million lives, I'll go anywhere. The president talked to you, Sean, about what it was like from the very beginning, from when he met the 34-year-old. Listen.
You didn't think coming in here you were going to sign an agreement, and you said maybe it takes 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings. But you were open to going as fast or as slow as he wanted.
We got along better than I would have assumed right from the beginning. We got a lot more done today than I ever thought possible. And he's going back. He's now headed back. And I think he's going back to get this done. He wants to get it done. You know, you hear the whole thing about his father and other administrations or his grandfather. The fact is that he brings that up. But they weren't dealing with me. They were dealing with different people, and they never got very far. Nobody's ever come close to this.
Did he talk about the difference between past administrations and yours?
Yes, but I can't say that because I don't want to be the one saying it. At some point, I'm sure he'll say it.
Yeah.
But they never got it done. And they were never this close either. I mean, it was never to a point where they were like we are.
Times have changed.
Yep. Sean, final thoughts?
Yeah, in many ways, if you really look at this could be a transformative moment for the entire presidency. And what I mean by that is America consciously did not elect an establishment figure, either a Republican or a Democrat. America elected an iconoclastic disruptor and a guy that works at the speed of normal business people and that wants to get things done. I really can't think of any political figure on the world stage today that would have started this back in March, is sitting here in June and telling us, again, where it all started, Little Rocket Man, Fire and Fury, and telling us that Kim Jong-un is probably going back to North Korea, and he has every belief and confidence that the process of denuclearization is going to begin immediately. That, to me, is transformative. Making decisions faster is transformative. And I think the biggest thing that we're going to learn about the presidency and Donald Trump's success is rooted in a very simple, fundamental, very basic principle that a lot of politicians don't get. If you make promises to the American people and you follow through and you check off your list one by one, that's good politics. You will be rewarded for keeping your word. That's why, as a conservative, I was so disappointed in so many Republicans that said repeal, replace for 7 years. And they didn't have the character to keep that promise. And they didn't even have a plan ready after 7 years, after 20 years of talking about health savings accounts, health care cooperatives. So what's transformative is, I think the presidency, the American people will now come to expect their president to move faster, expeditiously, to take risks, to mean what they say, and keep their word.
Sean,
so
real quickly, do
a
you
lot
know,
of hope coming out of this.
Do you
we
know
have
if
to be cautious, but certainly there's no downside to what's happened here at all. Only a win on every side, as far as I'm concerned.
Sean, do you know if he asked Kim Jong-un, why did you do what you did to Otto Warmbier?
You know, it's interesting. That's a really good question. He went into detail. I know you guys have had the family on the show. He talked about the family as close friends. And he said, I don't even think this would have happened but for what happened in that particular case.
He said
that
he didn't
to me
die
was he also said that he didn't think this would have happened had he not used the rhetoric that he used. Those are pretty interesting insider, strategic. It brings you a little bit into the strategic, tactical mind, I think, of the president.
Sean, we're going to watch you 9 o'clock tonight. I don't know how you're going to do it, but we'll see the whole interview.
No, you're not. You're going to be sleeping, Brian. You're not going to be watching my show.
No way. I'm watching your show. There's going to be a quiz.
You're just saying you're going to be up to be nice.
No, we'll be up. All right, Sean, thank you very much.
You guys get up at, what, 2 o'clock in the morning? I go to sleep when you guys get up.
No, we know. We pass them tonight. All right, a great interview. We'll be watching tonight. Sean Hannity live from
Thanks,
Singapore.
guys. Thanks for having me.